integrating analytics into the top audit areas. And I wanted to give you an approach that I utilize when integrating data analytics into the audit plan. And this will be more so at a localized level, like actually just doing it for your given audit itself. So we'll kind of start at the singular audit perspective, and then later in the program we'll talk about how you can integrate into the actual audit plan. Okay, so taking a look at a state of the technology use survey that's actually already been completed. I think it was released by AuditNet back in July or August of this year. What are those top areas for data analytics? And when you look at it, it is interesting. Payables and general ledger make up about 40% of the total. Receivables, inventory, a couple of others. I mean, you're really in a position where if you can just focus on those areas, you've gotten a little bit more than half the puzzle pie for utilizing data analytics. It would be at least half your audits, right? Most of your audits would be now using data analytics if you focused it on those 4 areas. And I was going to take the payables area and walk through that example. It's the highest one on the list for one, but it's also one that I think a lot of you are doing, so hopefully this is somewhat helpful. What I always like to do is start off with audit objectives. And from those audit objectives, think about questions that you would then ask in relation to those audit objectives, and then from there move into the actual tests that you would perform to answer those questions. So, I wanted to walk through that and give you a bit of a summary. And I'm going to try to bring up another document here. This was a book that I'd put together with Ekros called The Payables Test Set for ACL. And what it really did was it started out taking a look at the overall audit objectives. And for those overall audit objectives, and then kind of drilled into audit questions, and then batches, and then actual, scripting menus. And batches are now otherwise known as scripts within ACL. I think that as we look at some of these audit questions, is purchasing and accounts payable activities operating effectively and efficiently? There are a lot of tests that are really just inquiry and observation. So I wanted to note that. I think that related party transactions, there's no reason why that can't be automated. You could get a code of conduct data table of all of the people that people put down as conflicts of interest, and maybe assess how large are those conflicts of interest now that someone has actually put them down. Cash discounts you can actually look for. I mean, you get an idea of the ones that don't have inquiry and observation next to them. You can actually how do you know that there's not duplicates in your payables data? That question there obviously will lead to a script. And then what we did further in the book, and again, happy to send this out as an example and make it part of the data files that everyone gets, is actually getting the notation of kind of each script. So let me just get you one that might be a little more useful. Just giving a quick example here. This one is kind of looking for unrecorded liabilities and looking at payables towards year end. And again, it more or less gives you the objective up top, and then down below here are the data files you need, and then the final results that you might get. So I don't think that this documentation, you definitely, I think it's a good idea to kind of go with that documentation as well as just having audit objectives and questions to have the actual detailed kind of scripting information. But again, with these audit objectives in mind, we kind of drilled it down to these audit questions. There were about 60 audit questions we came up of from those audit objectives. And then from those questions, we had 35 scripts that we could run that align. So, you get an idea. There's probably about 24 questions that were more inquiry and observation. So the others required analysis. And then we set that up into a bit of a scripting menu at the end of the day. And I think that as you look at companies, that's the progression that you usually follow is, finding a few objectives, auditing, and all I'm trying to show here and notate as much as I can is the more you could sit down at the beginning of an audit and really think this one through and just spend a little bit of time AuditNet is such a wealth of information of audit programs that you could pull down and kind of come up with good questions to ask within a payables audit. And AuditNet also, I believe, is part of some of their audit programs. They have some automated ones, so you can actually get tests that you can run that may be useful in that particular audit. So it kind of gives you everything. But all right, enough talking about brainstorming. What do you ultimately come up with? What are some of the reports, and how do you organize some of those reports? Aside from organizing things by objective, I think it's a nice idea to summarize things by the 5 questions that it answers. So once you get some of these questions down and then the tests that you could perform, you might want to think about how, making sure that you're covering all of these who, what, when, where, and why questions. So I don't want to go through every one of these, but I just wanted to give you an idea of a different way of looking at it. And I like to triangulate these methods of utilizing my audit objective to question to report, as opposed, and also having a who, what, when, where, and why, because sometimes you forget a few of the perspectives. We don't have enough when reports in the data analysis. Let's kind of include some of those. It's a nice little checklist. So from a who point of view, you might want to summarize by who entered the item. From a what point of view, this is all general ledger testing now. You might want to take a look at summarizing on the amount field and taking a look at what amounts are showing up only once in the data and what amounts are showing up lots of times in the data. And sometimes some of those large, once type activity is really interesting to look at. So it's kind of it's more of a what around the values. From a when point of view, obviously weekends and holidays are interesting, but I also like to take a look at, prior year to current year and analyzing just really even a daily analysis. I mean, if you took your whole company, just going down to the audit here, but if you step back and look at the whole company across every business unit by day, it's a really interesting general ledger chart to look at and to identify those few days, and it's usually a few, where some really material change happened within that general ledger. But this could be done within accounts payable, it could be done in receivables, it could be done anywhere. So I'm a big believer in the day, month, year testing. From a where point of view, where is this ending up in the general ledger? Is it showing up in suspense accounts? Is it showing up in kind of revenue accounts when it's not revenue? Where is it being posted? And from a why point of view, I always like to ask, and I think as auditors we do this so naturally that we almost don't even have to write it down, but I do like to take a look at some of the strange occurrences. Why do we have round journal entries? Why did journal entries include the words plug or net to zero? And why do we have multiple journal entries right below an approval limit for an organization? So these are all kind of why tests. They're not so much, very simply who did it, what was the amount, when did it post, where did it post in the general ledger. Now we're kind of getting into almost like what's weird, or why does this stuff happen? And so that's some of the other questions here. And again, feel free to use these reports. I wanted to cover, as we talk through the actual audit planning, the actual specific audit planning, that we looked at general ledger and accounts payable, because they were the two noted top noted areas. I've documented for each report, and here's the report name, doesn't really matter that much. I just wanted to show you as I scroll out here, not that you can read it, but over across every column is basically, each column is a data field. So we have like invoice amount, invoice date, discount. So what I do is I put an X in every field that I need to produce this report. And as we get more into the process of running data analytics, I think this will come more clearer to you. But I think this is just a great checklist. I mean, it takes about a half hour to do. I mean, to sit down and just kind of knock off, putting in the 50 or so reports that I plan on running, and then over to the right here, just noting, summarize by vendor the total expenditure amount where there's discounts. Okay, I need invoice amount, discount, maybe vendor name and vendor number, and those are probably the only fields. Oh, I didn't even note vendor number. I should have. But just with these three names alone, I mean, that still gives you enough. My point of doing this is then you can then summarize this final listing and find every data field that you actually need to go request from management. So it really helps to, solidify what you're going to be running, but also what is the data that you're going to be needing to effectuate that data run. So that's some of the documentation as well.